can sometimes feel like a lot, but you don't have to do it alone. I strongly believe that we're stronger together. Here, we're going to slow down, have real talks, make sense of things together, and explore ways to intentionally grow the life you want. We're going to talk about mental and physical health, relationships, money, work, and community. Welcome to Rooted in Intention with me, Karina Gomez. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to be talking about environmental health and environmental justice. And I'm joined by a special guest, Darby Osnaya, who is the community organizer and programs coordinator with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. So, Darby, thank you for joining me. So excited to talk about environmental justice. To get us started, can you share a little bit about your story and what got you interested in environmental health and environmental justice?
Hi, Karina. So thank you. I am Darby Osnaya, any and every pronoun. Binary does not bind me. And community organizer, program coordinator with PC4EJ, People's Collective for Environmental Justice, specifically in Colton. We do work throughout the Inland Empire, west side of San Bernardino, Colton, San Bernardino Airport Community, and Bloomington. So for myself, I've always been, I guess, aware of environmental injustices. I was brought up as a first generation, born in America, Mexican family from from poverty. We're not rich. So we definitely had to reuse, reduce, recycle that's just what we did. It wasn't like we could afford not to, and generations before couldn't. So that was just the way of life. It was just what it was. And out here, recycling, you get some money back for it. So that was definitely something we did about once a month. Take our recyclables in, and have some Sunday fun day money or gas for the week. So that was definitely a plus for us. Grew up in the 90s, so Captain Planet was really big for us. I shout out to the message that they put out there. And having very creative parents with green thumbs, as you mentioned earlier, this is my front yard. I'm blessed to have a very green thumb parents. We are all about growing our own food. For my dad's side, he grew up on a farm. My mom's side, she was the first of her generation to be in the city. So from her mom and dad, they also come from farming backgrounds. Self-sustainability in a sense of being able to grow your own food is also something that's been conditioned for me, normalized to me, and sharing it too. I love it. Now as an adult, when I see my parents and my tios and tias and padrinos, their compas, friends, and they're just like bringing food to each other from their trees, their fruits, veggies, and they're just exchanging just like nothing. It's not like a tit for tat sort of thing. It's just like, hey, I have an abundance of this, or just surprise visits, like my tia coming and just like, hola, and then she's like bringing nopales, or vice versa. We have nopales too, or bringing limones, just whatever they have, they bring, and that's just something that's done, and I love it when I'm able to do that with my friends, and vice versa, where we've exchanged a lot of citrus fruit. And getting involved in environmental justice is when I learned that citrus fruit was actually invasive and part of colonization a couple generations ago out here.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and seeing like the warehouses replace the citrus groves, it's like just continuing that colonization. However, we don't have citrus groves. We have like a handful of trees that are citrus. This is for myself speaking. Other houses have one or two. I do love that we do have a mispero. I've always called them
I
misperos.
love misperos.
Yeah, but supposedly the right word is mispero con N. But tomato, tomato. I'm not saying mispero because that's how I was brought up. They are native to this area, and I love their natural story is that they don't last long off the branch, so they can't be sold. Like they can, but it needs to be that day. So I love seeing that there's a lot of misperos. I think they're loquats in English in the area. So, like, hey, that's native. I want to say indigenous disruption to colonization. And I love seeing it because it's like, hey, we're still here and you cannot commodify us, like speaking for the loquat. But yeah, so I've always been involved with environmental stuff, just being aware of not throwing away things if you can reuse them. Like, totally was brought up with like the old sour cream. containers for salsa, stuff like that. Although then as an adult, you learn that it still releases microplastics. So it's one of those, we are doing what we can with what we have. And I've been involved with Sierra Club in the past. I'm core team member of Chica. It's a collective co-op actually out here in the IE, Chicano Indigenous Community Collective for Advocacy and Action, and amazing work. So we're always always talking about the importance of land, environmental justice, and centering the voices of the original stewards of the land here in Colton. It's Tongva folks, but the Inland Empire in general, Tongva, Cahuilla, Serrano, or Yuhaviatam would be the main three that I can think off at the top of my head. And yeah, so being involved with them, and then just with all my work, eventually got involved with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice, PSEDG, as a volunteer. It was very organic. They had just started in 2020 and very small. And because of the organicness of it, that's how they started in West Side, somebody in the airport community. That was just the people they were working with. So when they got involved with Colton, it was my good friend Angie Valderas. Shout out Angie, been a good friend of mine for about 16 years now. She connected me to them, was a board member. Now she's the main communications team person. And she, yeah, connected me with them. They would come out and help us with public comment and be, giving a lot of that data information that we locals didn't really have too much of, because we would share our stories like, hey, like we have a recycling center that shreds metal, like big containers and trucks, automobiles. And we've been telling them, like, you got to contain that because that's metal aggregate, or basically little dust of metal in the air. And it's basically kind of the middle of the city because it's right where the freeway and the train cuts off the downtown area, and then it's officially starting the historical South Side area. But either way, like, things travel. But yeah, the South Side does get the brunt of it. It is historical out here. And just other stuff. I live right next to the train tracks. That's also part of the history of this train town that allowed for, like, even in the historically nice communities, they're still pretty close to the train. But here it's right in my backyard. So that has always been an issue. And clocking them at City Hall forever, telling them, like, hey, like, y'all got to get better at giving us some protections. But then they're like, that's federal, we're local. But anyways, being able to share our stories, local organizers here and PSEDG employees at the time, now colleagues, coming and letting us know, or educating or learning with us. And then when doing public comment, letting the council know, hey, these are the scientific facts. So that's a little history of how, they got into the communities that they're in. Same with Bloomington. Yeah, with me, it's an ongoing history of why I'm with environmental justice. And I've always been working in human rights, social justice line of work, because I'm definitely a person that, for my mental well-being, I can't just work somewhere that's just like a paycheck. Um, it's like, through college, I did Carl's Jr., and that was fine for what it was. I, built community there, made some lifelong friends there. But yes, just like the capitalism of it all, the just so much abuse of power there. And then it sucks because, with 2020, COVID hitting, it reminded us how much we need to respect and value folks that are in the front line of restaurant work and retail work and what have you. But yeah, I've always been, besides that job, most of my jobs have been working in community settings, educational settings. Like, either I was like a tutor, and I worked for Planned Parenthood for a little bit for their advocacy side, teaching folks about sexual health of all ages. I've worked in HIV prevention and management. And mental health counseling. So that's a little bit of a background with me, but I've always been volunteering. And yeah, so it's just an ongoing effort for myself. The environment is something we need. It's just, I was taught from childhood, like, we gotta take care of our surroundings, of the land that we're on, because, like, basically it's just the cycle of life.
Yeah. It's
Take
our
good care of
home.
it. Yeah, it's our home. Gotta take good care of it so you can feed, you can live off the land, and there's a give and take with all that. And as an adult, it's like, and working in environmental justice, it's just very more prominent, especially I've also worked in after school programs. So the importance of teaching our youth that we need this, that we need to maintain that connection with the land, with the air, with the water, and having like responsible burns, because fire isn't bad. Fire is used for cleansing purposes.
Mm.
That's, what a lot of the indigenous caretakers did. The indigenous folks that would do the force to clear out the dry shrubbery. So, like I said, I'm always learning. And the more I learned about air pollution, the more I learn about how much it does affect our general health. Mental health obviously is always connected to that because, you break a bone or you have cancer or you have some sort of ailment, eventually it does take a toll on your mind. I love intersecting it all and I love learning how it's all intersectional. And I just keep with it because I feel like environmental and the way PSEDGE looks at things is it's all environmental. It's so easy to get lost in the details and see how it's all connected, how what's going on with ice, how it's still connected with environmental injustices, and how that also affects our mental health and our physical health because people are not going to the doctor that need to go to the doctor because they don't want to get caught up. So stuff like that, we're very mindful at, and I do appreciate working in a place that is mindful of the intersectional parts of environmental justice and not just like grant focus. Like this is what our grant says, so we got to do this. It's like no, we look for grants that help us in a holistic way
Mhm.
and being able to attend to our communities and be the best organizers and providers that we can be and not just focusing on one thing.
Yeah, and I completely agree of how not just interconnected we are, but how
Mhm.
interconnected so many things are. And talking about ICE or really anything that causes fear in our communities. Like I was talking to someone and they were sharing just like, oh, I just with everything going on, I feel more scared to go out for walks, which
Yeah.
influences obviously the environment, our community, but then also thinking about how we build our communities and the environment around us. Like, are they walkable? Are there trees planted? Like, I'm very privileged that I live close to the ocean, so I feel comfortable and it's like nice being out in nature. But then if you're in an area that's like surrounded by a lot of industry, like going out and taking a walk is just going to feel a lot different and maybe not as refreshing as if your community was surrounded by trees and that type of thing. So completely agree that everything is so interconnected. And I think two things that I kind of want to go back to what you were saying was one of how you were saying of some of the things that you witnessed growing up within your family that I think resonates probably with a lot of people that were either like immigrants or were like children of immigrants or grew up poor is how a lot of sustainable practices were just a way of life. Reusing
Yes.
containers, sharing what you had with your community members. And I think that's one of the things where just looking at how environmental health efforts are looking right now and how mainstream it has become to even do things like going to thrift stores and buying reuse, it's actually really cool because I think to what you were saying of just it's kind of like going back to things of how we used to do things and kind of embracing things that we some of us have already been practicing for quite a while. And I want to take even a step back a little bit because we've been talking about environmental justice, but I
Mhm.
think some people might not be familiar with the term. Can you share a little bit more of how you view environmental justice?
Yes. So for environmental justice, it is fighting for a better, cleaner environment, cleaner air, or just clean air in general, clean soil, clean water. And so that when we do have an education around fire, the four elements, so that we know when and where is best to use it for rituals, for to clear shrubbery, which could also be ritualistic. So yes, education is a big part of it. Yeah, my view of environmental justice is about fighting for what should be the norm, which is clean air, water, soil, clean earth to live on, and not have to worry everywhere you go in California. You see, or just about every business you go to in California, you see the Prop 65 notice. And it's, just saying, hey, these chemicals are here, they could cause cancer, birth defects, and this is all we got to do, just let you know. And it's like, I need to shop. And even if I don't shop there, it doesn't mean that these chemicals aren't out there. So yeah, like tangible things are like walkable cities, disability justice, because that goes with walkable cities. Because if something is accessible for the disabled, it's going to be accessible for everybody else. Same thing with like shade, natural shade through trees. That helps with the oxygen, and also not just any tree. You need to have trees that are non-invasive and as close to native as possible. I understand also trees, seeds, birds, and the bees, and things have been passed around the world since time immemorial, since before we were here.
Yeah,
Uh,
very quickly, for the citrus trees, I had never heard that they were an invasive species. And I kind of sort of grew up in Orange County in Anaheim.
yeah, of
And Orange County, that's part of its history. Like there was a lot of
course.
orange trees back in the day. So I thought, oh, these must have been native to the area. But now that you say that, I'm just like, what was the history before the orange trees? Or how did they even get there? I've never dived fully
Yeah.
into it.
So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, highlighting that, especially how much on the Mexican culture, it's, we love our oranges, we love our citrus,
The
and
limones.
yes, limones, and yeah, but yeah, citrus, I believe, is from Asia, and I know for a fact it's part of colonization. I believe it is part of definitely a lot of British companies. We're literally just one, maybe two. I myself would say I'm one generation apart from this being all Southern California specifically being very citrus heaven. Like I said, part of colonization, part of taking from Asia and bringing it here and finding out that we had land that was fertile for it, and growing it because they saved on shipping costs, so they brought it here. But because we actually used to have cold nights during the winter, I recently found out through one of my friends who also works with us at PSEDGE, but her and I went to high school together, so longtime friend, Emily Vasquez, shout out to you as well. She taught me about her parents telling her they remember the smell from the machines they would put in and around the citrus groves to keep them warm during the cold winter nights.
Mhm.
And whatever oil, whatever product they burned, it just smelled horrible. And I
Mhm.
was just like, what? We had cold winter nights that were that cold that you needed that? Because, ever since I've been here, the coldest winters aren't cold enough to ruin citrus. And so to know, I'm like, wow, that's a difference between how cold the winter nights really were.
Mhm.
And so that leads to air pollution. They also require lots of water. So we used to have a lot of water. I live like about a mile north from the Santa Ana River. It is dry, but there is water running underneath. That also has to do with the dams. There's a dam in Big Bear mountain area, and there's a dam in Corona, which is basically like the midway point between basically from where I'm at to like Orange County, like Anaheim per se.
Mhm.
And yeah, so those dams being built there also restrict water, which also restricts ways of the natives like the Cahuilla, Serrano, Yuhavitam, um, Tongva folks. So a lot of it is about divide, conquer, control. You control the land, you control the waterways, you control everything. Even like I have family in Porterville area, so Bakersfield area, and a couple of years ago there was so much rain that it flooded what used to be area that used to get flooded all the time because that
Mhm.
was cleared out with dams to create farming. So rich
Mhm.
white men had money, and they're like, I want this land, but it needs to do this for me. So
Mhm.
they would make everybody else have to pay the price, and this rich white man paying leaders off got stuff done that way.
Kind of that like extractive mindset
Yeah,
of like I will get what I want from
yeah,
this.
yeah. And everything that I'm saying, like I can't provide resources. So please, anybody watching, fact check me, double check things, get the details. Something that I just remember learning a couple years ago. And with all the information, the disinformation age we're in, things get forgotten. You know,
Mhm.
the wars that we're in, like I'm here wearing, I stand with Palestine, like, those are indigenous people being pushed out. And it's like, for me, it's like, if you're really native to that land, why are you destroying the olive trees that are native to that area? Why
Mhm.
are you destroying that land? Why are you bombing it with such toxic bombs. Like that's not what somebody who is like, this is the land, you would take care of it and you would work with everybody that's already there. Because it's also for me, it's not about like, okay, let's just push everybody out. Like at this point, there's so much global migration that's happened that's working together and respecting each other's cultures and learning the customs to, to a point that you're respectful of them. At your home, in your community, you'll do things your way, because of course, I believe we should keep that. I and don't want to be seeing everybody worshiping one type of religion or what have you, like doing things one way, because I think that's how we got into a lot of problems. But respect where you're at and to honor, because here it was illegal for the indigenous folks, the natives, to practice their customs, and now a lot of people are like appropriating that. So yeah, like don't appropriate it, do it respectfully.
Hearing you talk about environmental justice, what's really coming to mind for me is really how it comes to, like you said, honoring the land, honoring the practices, and also looking into the strengths of your local community. So things like, what does the weather look like right now? What are the native plants that grow right there? And then like tapping into those. So you're kind of like working with your current environment to allow for everyone and everything to thrive, not just humans, but also other species. And yeah, seeing all the greenery in your house, I think it's just really cool on multiple fronts because I don't think I shared this, but I actually worked in the environmental health space. And there was a project where I was doing some research on bioremediation. So, obviously, oh, maybe not obviously for people that are
Mhm.
listening, but in the Inland Empire, it's a city, so you have some like industrial pollution and that type of thing. A lot of chemicals that like go into the air that sometimes aren't the greatest for humans or for other animals. So remediation is the act of cleaning up sites that have been polluted, typically by industries. So the bioremediation is actually using plants that can absorb in some way the
Yeah.
chemicals that are into the air. So there's a lot of community groups also looking into what are our local pollution issues and what plants, what might we be able to use plants or fungi in order to absorb those pollutants so they aren't just like wandering in the air or like traveling through the soil. And just seeing all the plants that your parents have in their home, it just makes me think of all of the benefits of the air that you all have, but then also possibly what they might be absorbing from the railroad that's like right behind you
Yeah.
guys. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you for that. Thank you for that reminder. Top of my head, sunflowers are actually really good
Mhm.
for, I believe, the soil. And there are native species to California. So folks out there love sunflowers. Please buy some, take good care of them, and they will take care of you. And definitely talking to any of your local master gardeners or botanists, herbalists, garden girlies. like yes, to go back to like culture, I feel like culture sharing and honoring is very important with stuff like that, where we can learn from our local folks, break bread with one another, share our customs with one another, and be willing to learn. And especially in California and America, we're taught to, like we got to learn everything, we got to be masters, and we got to be know-it-alls. But it's like you also got to learn to just be humble and to be like, I know what I know, and I'm open to other knowledge. I also feel like we are taught, especially in religious ways, to disconnect from the planet and to the world. And it's like, no, we're all one. We're part of it. That's why, like, we can heal using herbal medicine. That was the original medicine. And yeah, with the air quality here, yeah, a lot of cancer out here, a lot of suits. We have solar panels that are constantly having to be cleaned because of the soot, the dust, all the
Mm.
dirt from the railroad goes over and settles there. So, we have to have constant cleaning of our filters, air filtration, and a lot of my neighbors across the street, they really get it bad on their piso, on their floor, their
Mhm.
cement driveways. And so I feel like it goes over us, sprinkles a little, but then sets on the neighbors across the street and beyond them. And yeah, we've had cases of people here who are multi-generational and they're being born with issues and they're dying young of cancer. And it's just sad. It's just sad. And I do feel like with all the greenery that we have a bit of a bubble here. I'm not 100% sure what's native or not native to this area or to the Americas here. Like I said, like my parents have the green thumbs and they know more about that. And I'm always open to learn of like, okay, what plants do we need to keep? What plants should we switch out for the biological remedial, or what are you saying?
Remediation?
Remediation. So
Yeah.
I'm also open to learning that because yeah, I wish when they built the railroads, they would have been conscious about like, okay, we're building these railways, let's build something that, helps neutralize the pollution that they bring forth. But of course, that was not the case because they didn't care. It was all about money and it was all about taking over land. But if they would have made, planted trees that could have cleaned up the air and the soil that the train dirties up, that would have been great for
Mhm.
Bolton in general and the IE in general and everywhere where there's railways.
Yeah.
I'm very pro, using railways for transportation purposes, for public transportation specifically. And, we need them. We live in a society where we need to transport commercial items and passengers. I really do wish we had more investment so that they can be used for public transportation and that these rail companies, specifically BNSF and Union Pacific out here and the IE, would invest in cleaner solutions, cleaner engines. They're still running engines that are decades old, close to 100 years old. Once again, double check me, fact check me, folks. Uh, and I think some are even up to 80 years old. Like, girl, you're not going to drive a car that's 80 years old. Like,
Mm.
and don't get me wrong, there's beautiful cars that are 80 years old, but you've had to do a lot of work on them so that they don't, for smog purposes. Same thing, but why can't we do that for, like, I feel like the personal consumer, the individual consumer is held at a higher standard than these rail companies. And then with freight, well, they're not being really governed too strictly when it comes to like smog pollution. So then, it kind of goes to the truckers, and the truckers have to be held to a higher standard, but also they're still causing the damage that they're causing, that an individual, if they're to be doing that with their own car, like it'd be a far worse consequence for them. Yeah, there definitely needs to be better. So this is the work that I continue to do with PSEDGE to push forward for cleaner freight. We're always learning about better renewable energy. There's nothing perfect right now, but if we don't try, we're not going to get there. There's plenty of electric trains throughout the world, especially Europe, parts of Asia, I know for sure, like in Japan, that work great. I understand with a lot of these fully electric batteries tend to be not the best for the environment after so many years. But if we don't try, you don't go from 0 to 100. We crawl, then we walk, then we run.
Mhm.
So that's my message to freight, to industry out there. It's like, yeah, you got to put in the effort. And with the work we do when we work with like independent like truckers or talk to them, like they're doing what they can. We have nothing against, hey, it's La Chamba. We got to work. We got to do what we got to
Mhm.
do. And it's always the independent, the small businesses that are more active about doing things right for themselves and for the environment than these big guys.
Mhm.
So just clocking it, I know that I'm blessed, privileged to be able to live around all this greenery, which is like I guess a small little natural air filter in this very contaminated area. But even with that, we still need air filters inside the home. And you said earlier about like walking and being able to walk, and when you have nothing but just industry and stuff that pollutes the air, it makes it really difficult for people to want to go out and walk. Or when you don't have walkable sidewalks, which a lot
Mhm.
of the IE doesn't. I Here in my community, so and so, we do have for the most part sidewalks. They're not always the best, like the best taken care of, but they're there. I'm very happy to say that Colton recently, in a lot of the major streets, implemented official bike lanes for the
Mhm.
cyclists.
Mhm.
So it's good to see, hey, promoting cycling, making it safer in a way, because I get it. At the end of the day, if a car's going to be driven by a bad driver, then there's still a risk. But yeah, that's a step forward to acknowledge what the city did to make the major streets more bike friendly. I
Mhm.
appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
have been seeing more bicyclists on the road now versus the sidewalk, because it was safer for them to be on the sidewalk. But also, once again, very small effort, and when many things need to happen, be it taxing the transportation company so that they can keep on taking care of our streets, or having them go green as possible with the air pollution that they cause with the smog and the suits. Because yeah, the individual having to take care of all that, I'm over it. I'm all about individual consciousness. Like you said earlier about thrifting, it's like that was stuff that we just did. Like, There used to be across the rail tracks, Desert Indus, una segunda, a thrift store.
Mhm.
And it was like big. It was like the size of a warehouse. Now it's ATVs, and another company now works there. So I do miss that the thrift store was there, but they moved to a bigger location in Fontana. But yeah, so warehouse size, we got a lot of great deals. I got a lot of suits, that were great. But now you go to thrift stores and it's like sometimes they are overpricing them. It's also the idea of how do we make it sustainable where folks don't have to go into fast fashion. And
Mm.
like because if I'm gonna get a better deal going to Ross than I am going to the thrift store, there's gonna be a movement there. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
it's also shouldn't be on the individual consumer. It should be
Mhm.
like, hey, we do have lawmakers and we need to be able to push them for better legislation on like fast fashion, because that's one of the bigger global polluters. So this is why I like connect it all back to like intersectional issues of like, okay, thrifting is amazing for the environment, but how do we make that where it doesn't get commodified? Because yeah, I see these posts and I'm probably going to see them now that I just spoke about it. People are like, thrift this and you can sell it on eBay for this amount, and it's like,
Mhm.
so thrift stores are catching on.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
but hey, I'm still very much thrifting, and we used to do the penny saver back in the day for a lot of stuff.
Ah, I remember that.
The
Yeah.
Penny Saver, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. A couple of years ago, we got basically a brand new lawnmower for like $100 or give or take. It was basically new, but yeah, it was Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah. And
So
growing up for us, we used to go to yard sales quite a bit
yeah,
too.
a good yard sale.
Yeah, and then a coworker friend actually got me into buy nothing groups. So also Facebook groups, but a little bit different from the marketplace because people are usually selling things.
Mhm.
But a lot of local communities have Facebook buy nothing groups where it's just neighbors sharing like, I don't want this to go to the landfill. Does anyone want it for free? And people share a whole bunch of things from like actual tech items to like, hey, I have extra baby formula. Any moms want this? So it's actually really cool. If you still have Facebook, I feel like Facebook is for some of us older folks. And I know for PC4EJ, one of the initiatives that you all have is an eco tianguis. And I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, Eco Tianguis, we incorporate a free store. It's where people come and bring predominantly clothing items, but we don't turn anything away. And we're open to local vendors. Last year in December was the first time that we actually asked for, I want to say, about a $25 vending fee, and that was to help with the Palestinian youth movement of the IELNOC. So it's our way of being able to directly support, without breaking any of these really strict nonprofit rules that they're imposing on us when it comes to supporting Palestine. So we'd let people know like your money isn't just going back to us. Like we got funding for this so that we can put this event together. We feed the community. We make sure to book local vendors. And yeah, so the buy nothing perspective, which I definitely need to do more of, we incorporate that with the Ecotianguis free clothing store.
Mhm.
So yeah, people come and it will have just a lot. There's like 2 cars worth of items, and by the end of the event, half of it is gone or less than that. So that's one way we make sure things don't go to waste with the Eco Tianguis and uplifting local artists, vendors, and yeah, initially was for free, but yeah, with being able to support the local movement to free Palestine, we asked for the fees, and it's about building that community. To let the vendors know, hey, make sure you take some time to go and talk to the other vendors, and yeah, there's a lot of exchanging of information, and there's people who do the what's called upcycling as well. We have that with Ecotianguis. And yeah, so it's just a really great thing. Long-term goal is to be able to host one more regularly and have more diversity of vendors and more possibility of, yeah, like the free store, the buy nothing. But yeah, I'm going to be looking what we have here that are buy nothings. I know in Riverside, they do have something similar to that where they meet up and it's basically just local bartering. I think in one of the local parks in Riverside. But I'd love to see about doing that here in Colton. I know one of my friends did that with the clothing in San Bernardino with the business that let us use their breezeway, and it was basically it was same thing. It's a great idea. It works. People, please, yeah, I'm a local organizer here, so if you wanted to get something like that done, please let me know so we can plan it and Maybe PSETch can sponsor it, maybe. Not trying to speak for my org here, but I can definitely provide my physical presence, self, and whatever I can do to support table, whatever human power you need
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, because I don't say manpower because that's so it sounds just sure it's rooted in machismo, like manpower, woman power, and
Uh,
being non-conforming myself. It's like okay, gender-wise, I've come up with a term called musheshe that derives from mushe, from the Oaxacan culture, but I'm not Oaxacan that I know of. My family is mom's side Guadalajara, Zacatecas area. My dad's side outskirts of Mexico City.
Musheshe, what does that mean?
So when I learned about the mushe term, me and a couple friends who are also very non-conforming, non-binary, we loved it. We love mushe is non-binary, trans. So mushe originally is for non-binary, trans, assigned male at birth individuals
Mm.
who have taken on the traditional feminine woman roles. But there's a variety to it where you can, basically be what we would consider like trans, where they transition and live completely as a woman, and or they still present as male, but they just do socially things that are both male and female,
Mm.
and anywhere in between and beyond.
Yeah.
Musheshe takes from that and is like for an individual with indigenous ancestry to the Americas, be it from North America, South America. We don't want to limit anybody, regardless of whatever gender, sex you were assigned at birth. Basically, if you're non-conforming and have indigenous ties to the land, be it North America, South America, Musheshe.
Yeah.
So that's where we took it from because we definitely didn't want to use a term that like I always had issues with like non-binary or just utilizing English words because
Mm.
I also do have an ongoing learning presentation on pre-colonial indigenous terms,
Mm.
global indigenous terms for the LGBT community. Because a lot of our globally there's words before the American English language. Anyway, so that's where it came from. So yeah, so I can provide Mushishi power
Okay.
and
I
the events that
appreciate
people have.
that. Yeah. I was like, if we go down colonizing language and what that looks like and what that means, I feel like that's a whole nother conversation. But thank you for sharing at least one more term because I think we're all on the learning path.
Yeah,
Maybe some more intentionally than others, but at
yeah.
the end of the day, I think we're all learning. And yeah, I think one of the strongest themes that really stood out for me today was not just the intersectionality that we were talking about earlier, but also how multifaceted a lot of these issues are because we've been talking about just like the individual actions that people can take from like using more native plants to what you were saying of like, hey, some of these issues require like different policies, different regulations, and the lawmakers are the ones that are in charge of that. And being able to acknowledge that our impact could be through an array of ways. And I'm curious if you can share from what you've seen, from the people that you've worked with, from the issues that you've worked on, whether people are in the Inland Empire or they're in a different community, different state. What would you say are some of the ways that people can get started on working on environmental health, environmental justice issues within their local area? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, I did mention Planned Parenthood in the past. I think that is a great way to get involved because using a binary term right now, women's health is very much affected by pollution as well. And a lot of folks, at least from the Planned Parenthood advocacy that I've worked with, see the connection. Like I said, especially the California Prop 65 thing that signage that says this, we have chemicals that could cause birth defects. And it's not like, oh, the baby gets it all like, hey, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer, and then it's also rectal cancer, prostate, testicle, penile. So male body parts also get affected as well. So maybe working with Planned Parenthood because I know they're more throughout the nation could be a great way to start because once you start learning about the lead causes of, I guess, sexual reproductive health cancers, you start kind of connecting the dots or looking at any local Sierra chapter. Sierra is also a national group and any other smaller chapters as well as that you may have. So sometimes finding the big chapters helps you connect with the smaller orgs and collectives or co-ops. That's how I've been able to do things. And yeah, using social media, let's use social media to our advantage so that we can connect. We do have a power over our algorithm. So I am very happy that I do get an algorithm that it does show a variety of things. And like I said, right now, it'll probably show me stuff that we just discussed, data tracking. That's a whole nother conversation, and stuff that I want to learn more about as well. But yeah, like the more you talk about stuff, like the more I talk about like Palestine and human injustice issues, I'm getting more of that on in my algorithm. And so try to do what you can to manipulate your algorithm to your liking. I know that's a big ask, but yeah, like searching for stuff, searching for free or buy nothing groups. If you are here in the IE or in anywhere, we are part of the Moving Forward Network, which is part of a larger network of small and big environmental justice orgs. So look up Moving Forward Network, look up PC number four, so PC the number four EJ.org, People's Collective for Environmental Justice. You can find us there. You can send us a message. Our communications team, shout out to Angie again. They're very great about shooting us our email right away. That's something to our general contact one. Email me, Darby, DARBY.o at PC4EJ.org. You can talk to me. We can see about planning something out here locally and quoting in the IE as well. Because yeah, it's just about putting yourself out there and also knowing where your limitations are at too, especially for my community of disabled folks. Y'all matter, and whatever you can do for the movement for yourself or for anybody else. So I bring that up because yeah, that tends to be a big challenge. A lot of spaces are not accessible a lot of times, or people, don't have the strength to go out. Disability comes in different ways and forms, and I acknowledge that, I honor that. Always open to learn how to be a better person when it comes to disability, because I've had a disability with a broken wrist. I was disabled for a while there. So, anyways, I acknowledge that, and I'm always open to making spaces accessible from the jump. One of the projects that I work, I'm co-founder of Solstice Theater Inland Empire. We do shadow puppet plays that discuss local issues, environmental issues, global issues, tying it all together. We have an array of over 20 fabulous plays,
I
uh,
love that.
different generations and different races and cultures. And we embedded it where, regardless of how many people show up, we have a ASL interpreter and we have a Spanish interpreter right then and there. So that's already our base. So we do that as a way to show other community members and orgs this is what a grassroots program project can do, because to us, that's us doing the bare minimum, making sure we have funding to have these interpreters. So two big orgs I can think about: Sierra Club, Planned Parenthood. Like I said, the connections are there. I do work with predominantly cisgender women, and yeah, like reproductive health and environmental health are very much connected. And like always, the women and the non-binary and trans communities tend to be the lead in social justice movements, and love to see it. And I love the community that we build with that, and the chances we get to grow and learn from one another. And, we got to be able to protect each other and be there for each other, because we're the ones that showcase how bad these environmental issues are for all of us. So if you can also find the local chapter, please look up and see if you align with them as well. Because I get it, we're not always going to align with everybody's mindsets or organizations' mentalities. But at the end of the day, we're all human, we're all communities. It's human beings that are working these programs, working at these organizations. There's my long-winded answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Darby, for your tips and the way that you are connecting all of these different things. If you are listening, don't worry, I will include links and resources in the show notes so you could click on those after the episode as well. And yeah, I think to what you were saying, one around with connecting with organizations that are already doing that work, and even you yourself of just like the familiarity that you have, the insights that you're able to share of like, oh yeah, these are some of the issues that we know are in the community or are impacting certain people. And these are the solutions that we're currently working on. And then I think too, the thing around the algorithm is, yeah, we definitely have control over our algorithm, not just in terms of what we're paying attention to, but what we're actively choosing, who we're actively choosing to follow. So being able to follow even the organizations that you mentioned and being more intentional and thoughtful about having our algorithm curated by that as well. So definitely agree. And yeah. Thank you, Darby, for joining me. This has been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything I didn't ask you or that we didn't talk about that you want to share more with people that are listening?
Another group, your local Girl Scouts, maybe even Boy Scouts, but I know they've been historically kind of problematic. But
Mm,
I've worked with local Girl Scouts here as well that have been great with like local cleanups as well.
mm,
So another org that I know is nationwide. So sorry, thought that at the top of my head. And yeah, just highlighting the fact of the importance of being able to work in communities if you have the strength to connect in whatever capacity to line yourself with other orgs or just create your own little community or connect with other community like the Buy Nothing groups. Please do that at your capacity. Just like as corny as it sounds, please make time for yourself. Please take those rest days when you just gotta rest, even if it's just doom scrolling. Like I can't tell you how you're going to rest, but resting is very, very, very important. Please take time to rest, take time to connect, and invest in what helps you feel better. Rest is crucial. Rest is radical, and yeah, easier said than done. I am
yeah.
acknowledging that. Easier said than done because a lot of us are working multiple jobs to get by. Can't emphasize enough the importance of rest and connecting to the arts
Mhm.
and connecting with people that you can just sometimes shooting the shit with people, just
Yeah.
talking with folks.
Yeah.
Very therapeutic. Also, at the end of the day, nothing replaces an amazing therapist, an amazing psychiatrist. I do have an amazing therapist. She's queer, she's fabulous, she's brown. So I acknowledge that privilege that I have. So if y'all can connect to an amazing therapist, please do so.
Yeah.
And whatever medicine you need, whether it's, traditional herbal medicine or the Western medicine, take it.
For sure. Two things I love talking about, mental health and rest. And if you
Yeah.
are having trouble resting, because I've been there as well, there's actually a whole podcast episode about rest, play, and joy amidst chaos.
Yeah.
So go check that out. And it actually talks about 7 different types of rest that I didn't come up with that, but someone shares about 7 different types of rest that we can lead into. And it's interesting that you brought up even the theater or just being able to hang out with friends, because that was one of the different types of rest is like creative rest, and how sometimes we need that like creative stimulation, creative output, and how important that is for nourishing ourselves. So wanted to plug that in. But thank you so much, Darby. This has been a wonderful conversation. And again, I will share all the links, all the resources, the organizations that you talked about in the show notes as well.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. And I'll also see what reference links I can share as well.
Okay, wonderful. If you haven't already, please leave a review. Let us know what you thought of this episode. And bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Rooted in Intention. Until next time, and remember to keep showing up for the life, relationships, and community you want. Now go, grow the life you want